In Vayechi, we draw in the close of the first book of the Bible, Breshit. We started in October to read this book, and now in mid-January, we chant Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. Stronger we are now for the reading, and we will be yet stronger next year when we read it through again. Reading books is likely the primary Jewish spiritual practice. While others have statues or other forms of iconography in their places of worship, Jews have a closet with a book that contains 5 books, and we read it over and over again, challenging each other for who knows what's been said about it over thousands of years, and more importantly, challenging each other to come up with new interpretations that truly work with the text, with deep listening and deep conversation with it. As good or even better than our ancestors, we are a people of the book. The economics journalist Paul Solman, kind of a favorite of mine, who many of us know from decades reporting on the PBS NewsHour, wrote, of the more than 1,000 essays he ran in his online publication Making Sense Business Desk, the third most popular, after a pop culture quiz and a retirement prep primer, was Botticini and Eckstein's essay that summarizes their book, The Chosen Few, How Education Shaped Jewish History from the years 70 through 1492, which argued that historical Jewish literacy rates led to the economic flourishing of Jews through history. In their words, in the world of almost universal illiteracy back 2,000 years, the Jewish religious leadership, the rabbis and scholars in the academies in Judea and Galilee, required each Jewish individual, child or adult, rich or poor, farmer or merchant, to learn to read and study the Torah. Instead of restricting learning, study, and knowledge to a small elite, the Jewish religious leadership of that time went exactly in the opposite direction. It pushed Judaism toward making literacy, education, and knowledge universal among all Jews. Centuries later, this apparently odd choice of a religious norm became the lever of the economic prosperity and intellectual achievements of the Jews, unquote. Given this core Jewish value, reading books carefully, in order, not a lectionary selection of a few sentences here and there depending on the whim of the preacher, and given layers of context through footnotes, commentaries, not just religious commentaries, but archaeology and history, each in conversation with the other, it is all the more striking to read 2 recent essays by Rose Horowitz in The Atlantic. The first was, quote, the elite college students who can't read books. To read a book in college, it helps to have read a book in high school, unquote. And her follow-up essay, How Gen Z Came to See Books as a Waste of Time. Young people might be responding to a cultural message. Reading just isn't that important, unquote. I'm not going to slam young people, so for those young people, oh, that rabbi, I'm going to have it in for him. I have good things to say about all of you. But there is a trend that I want to point out, and it's something that you may have experienced. She recounts university professors from around the United States, those in the congregation today can disagree with this afterward, and I look forward to that. University professors around the world, the United States, describing how they have slashed full book assignments from their syllabi, and especially long books. From the article, an alarming phenomenon has sprung up over the past few years. Many students are arriving at college unprepared to read an entire book. That's a broad statement to make, but I spoke with 33 professors at some of the country's top universities, and over they told me the same story. A Columbia professor said his students are overwhelmed at the thought of reading multiple books in a semester. A professor at the University of Virginia told me that his students shut down when they're confronted with ideas they don't understand. Criticizing young people's literacy stretches back centuries. I know we do it every generation, and they did it about all of us. But in the past decade, something seems to have noticeably shifted. Most of the professors I spoke with said they've seen a generational change in how their students engage with literature. So a literature professor who used to assign Pride and Prejudice or Crime and Punishment for one each for a week, like one gets a week, the other gets a week, has trimmed down to a slim diet of reading assignments. Now as students tell them up front that the reading load feels impossible, it's not just the frenetic pace, a book a week. They struggle to attend to small details within one full book because it's hard to keep track of the overall plot. A Princeton history professor describes changing their instruction since students lack the vocabulary and reading skills to take in materials. Back to the article. So why is this happening? The allure of smartphones and social media comes up, and it appears that many middle and high school students, so maybe it's the smartphones, but it's also that middle and high schools are teaching fewer full books. One student arrived at Columbia having read only poems, excerpts, and news articles in school. But one possible cause that I nodded to in my article, this is the article, is a change of values, not ability. The problem does not appear to be that kids these days are not curious or they're uninterested in reading. That's not true. Instead, young people might be responding to a cultural message that books themselves aren't important. Passages within books may be important. The professors I spoke with didn't think their students were lazy. If anything, they were shocked at how overscheduled and anxious college kids are today. And they saw that their student schedules are crowded with activities that are less about personal development and more relevant to future employment. So I was shocked myself when my own 7th grader, who is not here today, so I'm allowed to talk about her, sorry, was assigned, because that means they're streaming. I was shocked by my own 7th grade daughter I've heard about at a local Ann Arbor middle school, who last year was only assigned one book in English class, and it was very slim. And that one was soon completed by Thanksgiving. When I asked her why more hadn't been assigned, she said that the teacher noted that some students were struggling, and she didn't want them to be left behind. So reading would happen in class, each at their own pace, or often the teacher would simply read to the class in 7th grade. And that experience isn't unusual. Back to the article. Middle and high school kids appear to be encountering fewer and fewer books in the classroom. For more than 2 decades, new educational initiatives such as No Child Left Behind and Common Core emphasized informational texts and standardized tests. Teachers in many schools shifted from books to short informational passages, followed by questions about what's the author's main idea, what would be the best title for this passage, mimicking the format of standardized reading comprehension tests. In her legendary and provocative book, The Knowledge Gap, for those who know it, I love it, The Hidden Cause of America's Broken Educational System and How to Fix It, Natalie Wexler argues that the root of the achievement gap in American schools lies in a fundamental misunderstanding of how children learn to read. Instead of focusing solely on teaching reading skills like phonics and decoding, Wexler emphasizes the crucial role of background knowledge and vocabulary. That how to read a passage and understanding the vocabulary depends on what you know. That reading literacy goes up when you know history, when you know context. She contends that students from disadvantaged backgrounds often lack the rich store of information about the world that their more affluent peers possess. And this knowledge gap hinders their ability to comprehend complex texts, limiting their academic growth. Wexler advocates for a curriculum that prioritizes the systematic building of knowledge across subjects like history, science, and the arts. What does it help to identify in the passage in a science text that the main idea of the passage is that calories work this way if you don't know what a calorie is, if you don't know what energy is, and you don't know how food is digested and produces energy in the body? By immersing students in a wealth of information and vocabulary, schools can better equip all children with the foundation they need to become successful readers and learners. So think of it this way. Reading often is taught today as if it's a skill that can be applied to any text. Identify the main idea, identify the evidence, or if fiction, identify the main character, the problem to overcome, and the solution, and done. Now try applying that to today's parasha. Shimon and Levi, let not my person be included in their council. Let not my being be counted in their assembly. For when angry, they slay a man, and when pleased, when they're enjoying themselves, they maim an animal. Or Zevulun dwells by the seashore, a haven for ships. His flank shall rest on Sidon. How do you identify the main idea and the supporting evidence? What does it even mean? How would you understand that without understanding the full story? The context, for example, with Shimon and Levi, of their challenge to Yaakov's leadership after the rape of Dinah, and when Yaakov counseled pacifism, which they ignored. Or how would you even understand in today's parashah the replacement of Joseph with Ephraim and Manasseh, and the whole business of the left and right and the right and the left, unless you understand that Yaakov came into this world trying to grab the heel so he could come out first to get the double portion, which he did through scheming. And now he's giving Joseph a double portion right away by accomplishing it, even though Joseph is not Reuven, he's not the oldest, because he adopts his two sons, thus accomplishing giving him a double portion in that way. The knowledge gap's main argument is that reading's not a skill like identify the way things work within a passage and how they're related to each other, but is rather a process of acquiring and applying contextual knowledge. In other words, the thing we should probably be teaching the most is history. It's what is outside the text that gives it its meaning. Or else everything gets flattened to these pithy takeaways, that every book is really about believe in yourself and overcome challenges. If you don't hear that, just try working with kids on their Devar Torah. I've read one line, I already know. Believe in yourself and overcome challenges with difficulty. So consider for a moment Cain and Abel. Well, I know I can read that. It's only about 7 sentences long, right? Thou shalt be your brother's keeper. Am I not my brother's keeper? You should have been. Don't murder your brother, sibling rivalry, right? Well, might it help to know that Cain is a farmer and he offers an agricultural offering, and Abel is a shepherd and he offers a flock offering? Might it help to know that the entire context of the book of Genesis is that our history and our people are shepherds, and we're against the farmers until someone's going to have to farm when we get to Mitzrayim, right? And that the whole thing is about agricultural civilizations are corrupt and socially unfair with incredible inequality and serfdom. Doesn't matter that the context in the Garden of Eden is it's located at the Tigris and Euphrates, right? So that the context and the history give rise to your sense not only of understanding the text, but your sense of peoplehood. If you have no sense of history, then everything is an Aesop's fable. And no wonder Jews don't think it's important to know anything about the Bible stories beyond their pediatric experiences. Real Jewish knowledge is adding layers and layers of context, knowledge, and the consideration of how these have been applied to foster perspective. Our Jewish education and aspiration is not to teach stories like isolated passages, but to teach the Jewish story, God's story, as a 4,000-year history. It's why we read the story as a people of the book, one word at a time, sentence following sentence. So it's that peoplehood, it's that context that illuminates the page and leads us to the holism of being within the folds of the fabric of a people of the book. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Shabbat shalom. Service continues with